Okay, so in this discussion, we'll be talking about the body systems. So, as we know that the study of the human body uh, be divided into anatomy and physiology at your level. So we have anatomy, which is the study of structure, and then physiology, which is study of function. So you need an appreciation of how the body works, so how the body functions. So the body separates or groups its functions into systems. All right. So in each system, you then find organs in that system. So in our previous discussion, we talked about how we have 7 regions in the body, right? That we study in anatomy. Okay, so in terms of system, we have 9 to 10 systems, depending on how you're grouping, or sometimes can be 11 systems. So we have the following systems. So the first system is the integumentary system, right? So this is basically the skin. So there you have the skin, which is regarded as the largest organ in the body, right? So you have the skin and the accessory structures of the skin. So we're talking about the skin, we're talking about the hair follicles, right? So we're talking about the skin and its glands, right? Skin and its glands. We talk about the hair follicles, right? We also talk about the nails, right? So we talk about nails. So you also put the nails there, right? So just basically that. Okay, so your skin and the glands, okay, located in the skin, and then you have the hair follicles there and different nails, right? Then you go to the musculoskeletal system. So this system is combined, right? So it's a compound system. So you have a muscular system and then you have a skeletal system. So a muscular system and a skeletal system. So here we're talking about the big muscles in the body, right? So we have our skeletal muscles, right, that we have there. So that constitutes the musculoskeletal system. So we have bones, obviously we have bones, and we have muscles. And just an example of the bones. So we're talking about the skull, right? The bones of the skull, right? The bones of the hip, just an example. The bones of the lower limb, the bones of the upper limb, the humerus, the radius, the ulna, the bones of the hands, right? In terms of muscles, right? Just an example. We talk about the diaphragm, right? Just an example. We talked about the biceps, right? Femoris, just an example. So basically, we're talking about the muscles within the body, right? So that constitutes the musculoskeletal system. So this system is there for locomotion and movement, right? So the bones, they create the frame and the joints, and then the muscles then move those joints, right? So here the integumentary system, so with the skin which is covering, and the glands, right, in the skin which work in moisturizing the skin as well, right? And temperature regulation, right? And then we have the hair follicles as well as the nails there, right? So we move from that, we then go to the respiratory system. So this is basically involved in gases exchange. So we're talking about the lungs, right? Talking about the lungs. Okay, so we have 2 lungs, lungs on the left, lung on the right. So lungs, we're talking about the airway to the lungs. Okay, so on the airway, we're talking about the trachea, right? We're talking about the bronchi, we talk about the bronchioles, right? So that's the respiratory system, right? And it works with some vessels there because we're doing a gases exchange between blood and air, right? Then we have the cardiovascular system. So from this word cardio, that's heart, vascular, that's vessel. So here we're talking about the heart, right? So the human heart, and then we're also talking about the blood vessels. So you know our vessels mainly divided into arteries and veins and capillaries. Okay, so heart and blood vessels that constitute the cardiovascular. So basically distribution of components around the body, right? So that's the cardiovascular system. And then we have the digestive system. So we're basically taking stuff that you've eaten and then we're digesting. So we have enzymes there and we do absorption and then we throw it into blood. It goes to the liver, right? And then it's processed there, then distributed to the rest of the body. So that's the digestive system. So we basically have the canal, the alimentary canal. So coming from the mouth down. So we say the mouth, the esophagus, the stomach, the duodenum, the jejunum, the ileum, the cecum, the appendix. We have the colons up to the rectum, and then the anal canal. So mouth to anus. So that's the GI tract. So that's the GI tract. So that's the tract. Okay. Then we have accessory organs that work with the tract in digestion. So we're talking about the pancreas. So we're talking about the exocrine pancreas. Okay, the ones that secretes enzymes for digestion, right? We're talking about the liver, right? Okay, that processes the nutrients that have been absorbed from the GI tract. Okay, so that is about the digestive system, right? And then we have the urinary tract, okay, or the excretory system. So this is whereby we're filtering substances from blood and we need to excrete, okay? So that is done by the kidneys. So we have our two kidneys, the one on the left, the one on the right, okay? And the urinary system, right, has the kidneys, and then we have the tracts. So from the kidneys going downwards, so we talk about the ureter, you talk about the ureters, and then you talk about the bladder, right? And the bladder, you go to the urethra, right? You go to the urethra, and then it's out. So simple as that. So that's the urinary system. Then we have the reproductive system. So from the word reproduction, so we need to produce one of our kind, okay? So the reproductive system then be divided into a female reproductive system and a male reproductive system. Okay, so we have a female reproductive system and a male reproductive system that will be studied separately. Okay, so in the female reproductive systems, we focusing on the ovaries, right? We're focusing on the uterus, right? We're focusing on the vagina. Okay, so that's for the female reproductive system, right? For the males, right? So the gonads for the females as the ovaries. For the males, we focus on the testes, or say the testicles, right? And we also focus on the ducts. So the male ducts, right? The male ducts. So here we're talking about the vas deferens, and then you have the prostate and seminal vesicles. Okay, so we have the prostate and then the seminal vesicles. So that's it. Then we have the lymphatic system. Okay, sorry, I missed out the endocrine system. So endocrine, that is secretion of hormones straight into bloodstream, right? So endocrine system, it controls much of what is happening here. So the endocrine system, we start from the higher centers in the brain. So we're talking about, for example, the hypothalamus. So hypo below the thalamus. We talk about the pituitary, right? And the other endocrine glands in the body, for example, the thyroid. Some of the thyroids. You can also put the gonads there. Put the gonads, so the ovaries, the testicles, they also play a role there, right? We also put the pancreas. So pancreas is part of the endocrine as well as the digestive system, right? The pancreas, they put the adrenal glands, right? So then lastly is the lymphatic or the immune system. So the one that fights infection, right? Protects your body, remembers the previous infection, right? So here, lymphatic or the immune system, right? We have the organs, right? So here we put the lymph nodes. You study the lymph nodes in anatomy as well. You put the spleen, right? You put the spleen there, right? You put the spleen. You can also put bone marrow. That's when we produce our blood cells, right? So the spleen, we can put what we call mucosa, associated lymphatic tissue. So we can put something called mout. You talk about mout in histology, right? So that's and also the lymph vessels. Lymph vessels. Okay. So lymph vessels. So these are the systems that we have in the body and how the organs fit there. And then lastly, is the nervous system. Can I say one of the very important, but also one of the most complicated. So the nervous system. So here we broadly divided into the brain, okay, and spinal cord. So these two, they form the central nervous system, okay? And then here we put the nerves. An example of the nerves, the radial nerve, the sciatic nerves, right? The nerves and ganglia. And these, they form the peripheral nervous system. Okay, so the nervous system is made up of the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system is the brain and the spinal cord, and then it communicates with the nervous system, which is the nerves, and then the ganglia, right? So these are the systems that we have in the body. So I hope you understood this discussion.